I think that we can't just stop here. We have to look out throughout government, more transparency, more sunlight. I'm going to throw it back to Senator Moreno. I think has another couple questions.
Yeah. Mr. Matt Tabbi, you've been around the block, as they say, around the globe. You've seen authoritarian governments. What would be the American foreign policy reaction to a country that receives foreign aid, foreign assistance from the U.S. that did this to their own citizens?
Senator, I would hope that we would look negatively on any country that mass collected information on innocent citizens.
Surveilled their citizens,
Surveilled
put them on
their
watch
citizens.
list, prevented them from traveling,
Right.
had a presumption of guilt, not a presumption of innocence. Like we would probably call them in and say, hey, we can't continue this relationship because you're oppressing your own citizens. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think that would certainly be accurate. I know that we've raised questions about surveillance of journalists in other countries in the past.
And that was happening, as the chairman just said, literally FBI agents sitting down with private companies saying, you must remove this person from social media. You must go knock on their door. Some of the stuff we're seeing in the UK, which I'm very proud of the fact that our vice president is speaking out against what the UK is doing to their own citizens, like persecuting them for social media posts. Yeah. That's pretty outrageous, right? So this was happening over the last 4 years of the Biden administration. You would say, in the history of the United States of America, we've never seen more of a tilt towards authoritarian rule than we did under Joe Biden. Between firing people who wouldn't get vaccinated, you couldn't get a job, you were somehow a bad person, we were masking 2-year-olds, we were forcing the injection of an experimental, I'll generously call it a vaccine, and if you didn't do that, and if you didn't carry proof of that with you, that somehow you're a bad person. That was a pretty dark 4 years in the scheme of American democracy. Would you agree?
I would agree, and there was also a radical shift in attitudes in this country towards whether or not we should have laws against things like hate speech. There used to be a small minority of people who believe that. Now it's become almost a majority of people who believe that. You mentioned the UK. I interviewed somebody last week who was arrested for speech over there, and to the chairman's point, they have a system that allows people to make complaints that result in criminal arrests of people for social media posts. And, that could have been our future here. And so that's deeply concerning to me.
And I'll jump to you, Mr. Harper. I'll let you answer this one. Do you think in the scheme of things for Americans, I think Americans would think that their freedom, their liberty, their constitutional rights given to them by our founders is important. Just quick question, yes or no. Do you think that's important, really important to American citizens?
It is.
And do you think that it's ironic that Democrats that chase cameras saying that President Trump is a threat to our democracy are not even here? I think the record should show, Mr. Chairman, who attended this hearing and who did not attend the hearing. Because you can't go out there and go on camera and say that President Trump, the person who ended the Quiet Skies program, the person who's reforming what's happened under the Biden era, there's nobody being threatened to be fired for not taking a vaccine. In fact, restoring individual liberty, and yet don't even bother to show up to a hearing, which I think this hearing, and I said this to you yesterday, Mr. Chairman, is the most outrageous thing I've ever seen in Washington, D.C., and yet they can't even bother. And I think it's one of those things where you decide what's important. Like when you're a United States Senator, you can decide what's important. I can be in this hearing, I can be in another hearing, I can be at a fundraiser, I can be golfing, I can do whatever the heck I want. That's kind of the crazy part about being a senator. You don't actually have to show up to win, but you do. And the fact that the Democrats basically virtually boycotted this hearing gives them zero credibility when they say that this president is moving this country authoritarian. Do you want to comment on that, Mr. Harper? Am I wrong?
Well, your question on the perspective your question gave, if this were happening in another country, what would we say about it? Very powerful, because Keir Starmer in the UK is saying everyone is going to have a digital ID, national ID program. In the United States, we oppose that. And the Real ID Act of 2005 continually fails to be implemented, and hoorah for us, because it shouldn't be. It should be repealed. Financial surveillance is a product of United States law that we export around the world. And if you took off the label, Bank Secrecy Act, and put a Chinese label on it, you'd say, aha, that's China. It's what we do, and it's what the U.S. has in the Bank Secrecy Act, again, that we export through the Financial Action Task Force. There are so many issues that we could get to, but that insight, we shouldn't be doing it here. We should be leading in the United States on civil rights and civil liberties. So all of the things we've talked about, the transparency, anti-secrecy, no to a national ID, the perspective in your question was really important and helpful, I think. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just one request from my perspective. There's been almost no accountability to what the government did to the American people during COVID, like almost no accountability. People who closed schools, who made little kids get vaccinated masks. Can you imagine what that impact's going to be? You have kids. What the impact's going to be long term on 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds that were forced to be masked for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, or removed. No accountability. Look, the most accountability was that the American people fired Joe Biden, thank God, and prevented Kamala Harris, which would have been even worse. But we do have the ability to go into the current administration and say who within Homeland Security still has a job that perpetuated these policies. Because in my mindset is anybody, especially the person who wrote that memo that literally made my hair stand up, how is that person still employed by the United States government? And I think we need to ask that question while we have an administration that actually wants to protect civil liberties, that actually wants to protect the American people. And we cannot just ignore this. And again, there's a lot of things that have happened that I've seen in my 8 months here in DC, but this report was so outrageous. And the fact that my Democrat colleagues have no interest in listening to this says it all. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing, and thank you for all the witnesses for being here. And again, Mrs. Crowder, truly apologize for what you went through. It's completely insane, not just to you, but anybody who had something like that happen to you.
And part of oversight is not vendetta or revenge. It's removing people who abuse the civil liberties of Americans. And so far, the court has been consistent in upholding the president's right to hire and fire people in the executive branch. I agree with you completely, because we need to make sure that these programs don't come back again. The issue of anonymous accusation reminds me of a scene that I saw in Venice. There's a lion's mouth, Boca de Leone, and the Doge was like the king of Venice, and you could anonymously just put it in there, but you could lose your head or be imprisoned for life by an anonymous tip. One of the evolutions beyond that is sort of the idea of due process, that you can't just be secretly accused of things. And I think there is a real danger to that. And I think that's what happened in this case. And if this is somebody who works still as an air marshal, that person doesn't need to work as an air marshal. If it was a colleague or somebody that tried to get your wife in trouble, somebody did it. I have a feeling that it's malicious, actually. And I don't have information on that, but we want to get to the bottom of that. And the people who created and ran all these programs, of course we do. And I think your point is well taken on human rights. We have all kinds of strings that are supposed to be attached to human rights. If you're not a democratically elected government, I've tried using that one before because there are many coups that occur around the world. We keep sending them. I mean, Egypt still lives under a military rule after a coup. Technically, they're not supposed to. There was something called the Leahy Amendments. They're not supposed to get foreign aid now, but we do it anyway. We just exempt them from the Leahy Amendments. But things that we would enforce on other countries, we certainly should enforce on others. There are big categories of people, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, who have been abused by this stuff. But it really isn't always just either the color of your skin or the color. It could be the shade of your ideology. You could be a homeschooler or a Donald Trump supporter. You could be all kinds of things that may be outside some sort of mainstream. And to target those people is anathema to what our country stands for. I appreciate everything all of you have done in this. I appreciate your testimony today. And the records. I would like to enter into the record a set of redacted documents produced to the committee as part of this investigation. I would also like to enter the statements for the record from the Air Marshal, National Council, and other stakeholders. Without objection, these records will be entered into the record.
Senator Hawley's on his way, so do you have any more questions?
Senator Moreno, do you have any more questions? We have one senator that wants to come and ask a few questions, so I am going to wait another minute or two. Do you have anything else?
No. So just Mr. Levitt, you're an attorney. I'm not, so I'll ask you this question. If Congress passed a law called the Quiet Skies Law, what would the Supreme Court say?
That had the same substance as this.
Same substance. In other words, if we passed a law that said that the U.S. government can surveil American citizens who they suspect without any evidence of maybe committing a crime, and we passed that law, we all cheered and we passed it, and super bipartisan, and we threw a big party and had a ribbon cutting ceremony for the law and photo op, what would the Supreme Court say?
Well, two thoughts. One, we've seen past laws that aren't that different from that maybe, right? And so it's hard. And there is a balance, right, a policy balance. It's possible the Supreme Court, if it's not narrowly tailored enough, would invalidate that.
Because it's unconstitutional. Because we have a presumption of innocence in this country. Because if I decide not to wear a mask on an airplane because the rule is insanely stupid, I shouldn't be prohibited from ever flying again. If I want to travel to Washington, D.C., and I want to do whatever I want to do in Washington, D.C., that's well within the bounds of the law, that doesn't give any administrative agency the right to decide I can't fly somewhere else. It doesn't give the government the right to have somebody follow me and creep me out in the bathroom and decide whether I'm getting too many sugars in my coffee or if I'm going to the wrong yogurt place. And that report shouldn't be published inside some sort of official government document. Because, Mr. Chairman, there's a difference between somebody who has power because they're giving it to them because of some administrative things, or somebody actually real power. Somebody who has a badge, who has a gun, who has the ability to arrest you, has the ability to take your civil liberties away. That's what happened over the last 4 years. And Americans should be equally outraged about all this. This should not be partisan.
But I would interject that I think it's longer than that. And I think one of the witnesses mentioned this. This fear really originated after 9/11. So when they passed the Patriot Act, one of the things in the Patriot Act said that the government could go to your local library and give a secret warrant. It's not a Fourth Amendment warrant. It would be a FISA warrant. And they could get all of the different books that I read when I go to the library. All those could be confiscated, a list. But they went even further. They said that that you will put the librarian in jail if she reveals to me that the government is looking at my reading list. So we did a lot of things out of fear. And that fear from 9/11, look, there was anger, it was justified. There was a war, I think in many ways also justified. But we let down our guard on our constitutional liberties, and it's in times of fear you have to be most careful about them. We probably have 1 million Arab Americans in Dearborn. We probably have 10 million Arab Americans that are part of our country. Many of them are citizens. We even have Colombian Americans. They all deserve the same protections. That's many of the reasons why they came here.
So, but it is decently ironic that the Democrats looked the other way while our border was open to 10 million illegals streaming across our border.
I'll grant you that.
So I will turn things over to my great colleague from Missouri.